Hi, I'm Sean.
I'm Rhonda. When we see the spouse withdrawing, running emotionally or verbally, they're not connected, they're not involved, they don't communicate with us. There's a reason for that.
So what if somebody's thinking, well, I ought to be able to
Yeah.
present like this. I ought to, my spouse ought not to be running away
Right.
when I'm presenting. Well, you're in this together. Picture it like
Yes.
two yoke of oxen that are hooked up together.
Right.
You can't have one plowing, 100 feet ahead.
Right.
They're tied together. So you're tied together with your spouse. And then if you are wanting to plow ahead so fast that you're dragging them on the ground, you need to slow it down to a pace that the other one can keep up with.
Because usually what's happening in this scenario is the person who is tempted to get into the multitude of words and topics usually doesn't feel heard by the other person. So somehow, if you can set a time limit or something, or write in a journal and share that with your spouse and really listen, you might reduce this temptation to be wordy. And the other person who's withdrawing because this person is abrasive or overwhelming in some way, you can learn to set boundaries. You can be able to first be aware of yourself, know when this is happening, and then let the other person be aware. Hey, this is going on a little long for me and it's feeling overwhelming. Would it be okay if we wrap this up and come back to it later?
That's good. And we need to
Yeah.
both parties need to be okay with that when
Yes.
one of them is feeling overwhelmed.
Or I need some space to unwind. This is a little intense for me. We can ask for the opportunity of the other one to make an adjustment so we can continue talking. That'd be amazing, right? But if the other person doesn't adjust, or it has already crossed the line because we were unaware, and we can then ask for that space to unwind. And we need to do that, and we need to enforce boundaries when the other person is just too overwhelming.
So it'd be good when you're doing that to ask, what would a positive way for me to ask for a timeout
Right.
be? Because you might say, well, I might blurt it out like this, but it might
Yeah.
make her feel trampled on, right?
Right.
So I need to say, hey, what would be a good way that when I need a timeout,
Yeah.
what would come across in a positive way to you?
And if the less verbal person can learn to kind of stand up for what is needed for communication by setting boundaries, the less verbal person is more likely to feel safe, because then you have control. Because usually the person is withdrawing because they have no control. The other person's in control and they're being overwhelmed. So they feel like it's better to just not even go there. But we're going to encourage you to go there, but with boundaries. Be very clear. I really want to communicate with you right now.
Yeah.
If you would do it this way, it can work, and I can participate in that.
And so, that's something that I think that we've dealt with, is that if I was being quiet and not speaking
Right.
some when Rhonda was presenting something,
Yeah.
she perceived my silence as being disapproval,
Right.
and it came across negatively. And so,
Or lack of interest.
lack of interest, yeah.
Right.
So if I would speak up, and periodically, when she's saying something, I make connecting statements that, I hear what you're saying, I understand what you're saying, I'm connecting that I'm present.
Yes.
And, or maybe even that if, I'm challenged
Right.
by what you're saying and I need a timeout, or I need to think about it or something. Just
Yeah.
some kind of a communication going on there.
So you're self-aware. You recognize when you're starting to close or escalate, because you want to prevent that. You don't want to wait till it happens and then do something about it. You want to do something to prevent that from happening. So you're self-aware. You make the spouse aware. Let the spouse know you want to communicate. And for it to happen, it needs to look like this. Don't set the standards so high that it cannot happen. So you want to work with your spouse, but then you let your spouse know when we're approaching my boundary here. Hey, I really want to talk to you, but it needs to look like this for us to continue. Will that work for you? And if it doesn't and the spouse will not honor that request, you can always say something like, wow, I see that you're not reducing your intensity, so I can't just keep talking like this. I need space to unwind. Would it be okay if I unwind here in the same room, or should I go to a different room?
And of course, you want to make sure you're not inserting a jab in that,
No.
something to
That
hurt,
wouldn't work.
to hurt your spouse with your words.
Right. The goal is not to control the spouse. The goal is to control you,
Wow.
myself, so
Yeah.
that I don't cross a line and say something I shouldn't say.
Right.
And so that I can communicate with my spouse.
Right.
But if the spouse will not allow you to unwind in the same room, you can let the spouse know, I'm going to go to the other room to unwind, but if you follow me there and will not allow me to unwind there, I will leave the house. I'm sorry if it has to go that way, but know that if I do leave, I really want to pick up this conversation later. I'm just going to have some time to unwind.
That's a complex thing, because
is
I think
complex.
sometimes when one spouse is pursuing the other one, it may be with the idea that if we don't deal with it now, it's just going to get swept under the rug and
Yeah.
never come
There's
up again.
history
So
there.
giving
Yeah.
an assurance that, hey, I need to take a break from this now,
Yeah.
but we'll come back to it either,
Yeah.
at this specified time, maybe
Later today, tomorrow.
Right. Right. So I wouldn't go more than a day
No.
later before bringing it back up. But giving them the assurance, we're going to deal with it. I just need a
Yeah.
break right now.
And you may have to set time limits. Hey, let's talk about that. But because I get so easily overwhelmed, can we set a time limit and not go over 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Maybe it's 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And then work on it a little bit at a
Especially
time.
if it's a really sensitive topic, having
Right.
a time limit set can be really helpful.